Hi, as you watched our previous video with just simple Excel formulas, did you realize that maybe even though those will help you a lot of the time, that there are still times when maybe you need something just a little bit more complex? Well, we're going to look at functions today. There are over 400 of them in Excel, and they should help you do just about any kind of math that you want to do. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's start looking at functions and how you might use them. As I look at this shopping list that came from an ad at a local grocery store, and this was just their weekly sale items on page 1, gee, these looked pretty darn good. So maybe I may want to make a list and then take this to the store and actually buy these items. Now, the only thing is I might want to know how much money that is going to be. So I might decide to come here in B15, and then we know from our simple formulas that I could type equals B2, as I look at that, plus B3, plus B4, plus B5, all the way down through B14. But it just seems like with all of that extra typing that I might be doing, that it would give me a lot of room for error along the way. And eventually, if I type a really, really long formula, Excel actually has a limit to the number of characters I can put in a formula. So this isn't going to hit that boundary, but it could happen. So what could I do that would just make better sense than adding each one of those cells individually? Well, Excel knows that for the most part, a lot of spreadsheets use addition. Just like the tin keypad has that really large plus sign on it, with Excel you have a very special button, and it's even on your home tab, and as you come over to the right to the editing group, you'll find this button that looks like a Greek sigma or maybe just a fancy E, and it is called sum. The button is really called auto sum most of the time, and when I click on it, it gives me a function, not all of those simple plus, 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 plus types of writing, but it's actually a function. And as we look at it, we can see that it does start with the equal sign, but then it has something different here. It has kind of a math term, and then it has these cells in parentheses. Well, let's look at that in a little more detail as we look at the 4 different guidelines that we want to follow when we write a function within Excel. As we look at these guidelines for writing functions, you'll notice that there are quite a few of them that are exactly the same as the rules or guidelines that we use for writing just simple formulas. So starting at the top here, we're going to see that the format, the pattern for every function is that it starts with an equal sign, and then it shows you the function, the math expression. And so for some of us who haven't been in school in a while, sometimes that is a little difficult in that you kind of forget what all those terms were when you were in a math class. So for example, instead of saying, okay, I want a total of all of those numbers in a column, Excel uses the terminology sum, and I'll show you in just a little bit how you can go shopping for some of those terms and figure out if what you find is what you need. But for right now, we're simply going to say that you start with equals, then you have the name of the function, which is really just pre-programmed math for you, so that all you do is kind of fill in the blanks. Now, to the right of that in parentheses, and those parentheses are important, you have what is called the argument. And in a lot of functions, that when you read them, it's simply cell references in the argument. So let's see, we begin with an equal sign. We use a math expression. Use cell references when possible. The same idea applies here with functions as it did with our formulas, where if you use literal numbers, then if you change your spreadsheet, you also have to go in and change every time that you've used that literal number using a function in a formula as well. And again, in Excel, if you put in a space, Excel's pretty good about taking it out. So why type the space in the first place? And so just kind of general good idea is no spaces. Using AutoSum is a really nice shortcut. And while it would be nice if we had more buttons for more of the more popular kinds of functions, with over 400 functions, well, 400 buttons would really clutter things up, wouldn't they? So what Excel does instead is that what gives you two main choices. First of all, we could come up to the formula bar, and then just to the left of the formula bar, we have this FX button that's named Insert Function. And when you click on it, it brings up the Insert Function dialog box. And this dialog box is divided into three sections that you can kind of see here, where you can add a description, or if you know a category, then that is a big help. But either of these top two options then gives you a list of functions, this third box, that you can scroll through to determine what function would work best for you. Well, we'll come back to that in just a second. Let me cancel out. Because while that is really nice, and for people who've used Excel a long time, they may only use that particular button, but there's a nice big one that is even easier to find. So what we can do is go up to the tabs on the ribbon and find Formulas, which is about the fourth one, and we'll click on Formulas. And here, right below that word formulas, I can see that I have all sorts of options for looking through those particular functions that I'm looking for. So first of all, I have a function library, and it starts with recently used. So that's interesting in that it kind of keeps track of what I've been doing, and it will list all of the functions that I've used as I've used them, because sometimes you want to go back to that function. So it's a really nice shortcut if that's what you want to find. Now, then you have categories. So we have financial, for example, or we have logical, which is a little shorter list here, and you have and or, and even not, which may be combined within certain formulas. You have true and false as well, and then you have if and different kinds of if. So these are really important functions that you may find yourself using, all within logical. Date and time is another one that you may use as you determine how many days someone has worked or how many hours something has happened. Math and trig are just kind of the basic different kinds of functions, plus then, well, trigonometry, more advanced math as well. And then if what you want to do doesn't seem to fit within those categories, well, you have this button for more functions and more categories. Now, strangely enough, this still doesn't list all of the categories. So we're going to look at that in just a second here. All right, going to the left of our function library, then we have the AutoSum. And isn't that just a really nice big button that you don't have to worry about how you're clicking or how it appears? It is always the second one here on the ribbon in the Formulas tab, and you can use that just as well as I use the one on the Home tab. To the left of that, here is that Insert Function button again, but again, a really nice size, easy to find. So it becomes sort of evident that the insert function button and the AutoSum button are ones that people use quite often, and they wanted to make them as easy to find as possible. Well, let me go back then to the insert function, where we could type in a description or we could select a category. Now, because I clicked on math and trig a little bit earlier, then that's what it's showing. But let me go to most recently used, and it gives me a list. Now, it's not necessarily alphabetical, but it gives me a list of some of the functions that I've been looking at recently. It also here lets me, of course, type a description. So let me type, I want to add numbers. And when you type in a description, then you always go to the right to the Go button, click it, and then down in this third section, it gives you a smaller list, generally, of what is possible for adding numbers. So I know, for example, that sum is what I'm looking for. So when I click on sum, I can see by its definition down here at the bottom, where it adds all the numbers in a range of cells, that that is exactly what I want. Now let me click OK here in the lower right. And now it lets me add those numbers. Now remember that our range was B2 through B14, so I could fix that. And then I even get a preview of those cell values that are going to be added together. Now that can be really helpful, because sometimes when you look at that preview, you think, oh, I didn't really mean to do that, or I didn't mean to select that, or why is that showing? And then you know that you need to probably cancel out and do some more thinking on your formula. And then below, where we have that kind of preview, you have a really nice preview of what the actual answer is going to be. So, and again, we get a reminder that it adds all of the numbers in a range, and it even explains if there are some values in the cells that will be ignored or will be especially used or considered, then it explains all of that within this little definition here. If you have any kinds of questions about how to write that formula, then you always have help on this function in the lower left. And let me click OK. And yay, we have an answer that matches our first one here. Let me go back to that insert function for just a second. Oh, let me get off of the formula, then go back to insert function, because as you look at the select a category, and I click the drop down arrow, first of all, it has all functions, and they are in alphabetical order. And if you can't find it any other way, but you really know the name of that function, then you might just decide to scroll through that alphabetical list. But as I look at that category again, financial matches up. Date and time, it's in a different place, but yes, it's there. Math and trig, again, a different order, but it's there. Statistical, I think statistical was under more functions. But here's the one that's sort of interesting, and there may be others. Database is a kind of function that I personally like to use every once in a while. It not only does basic math, but it also filters in place. So I really like database, but it is not listed in that function library. So you could come here though to the insert function and still find database functions. So do some comparison and see that how you can find the functions that you really want to use. And that is our insert function, so I'm going to cancel out of that. Now let's go back and review basic math and start with addition, but we're going to use now a function instead of just basic math. Now, as I look at my spreadsheet here in B1, and I'm even going to bold it here, I have 15, and in D1 I have 5, and in F1 I have 7. So as I come down to a cell, let me click here in D4, my first choice is to add D1 and F1. So we know that I could write equals D1 plus F1, or I could do this. I could go to equals sum, and if I could type, that would even help. And notice that if I type the functions, because I really kind of know what I'm doing, or at least I know the function that I want, then notice how they even will pop up in a drop-down list. So let's see, equals sum, and it puts in that first parentheses for the argument for me. And then if I want to add D1 and F1 and skip something like B1, for example, then what I could do is simply click D1 or type D1, put in a comma, that means it's just this cell and no others, and then click on F1 to add in the F1, and then of course I want to add in the right parenthesis and press enter. And 7 and 5 is 12. That's always a hard one for me to remember, but yes, that is correct. All right, now I could decide to add all three of these individually, or I could say, you know what, I just want to add B1 through F1, and whatever's in between, I want to add that as well. So again, I could say equals sum, keeping in mind that sum means a total for addition, put in the left parenthesis, and now I have a choice. I could type B1 colon F1, or I can click and drag over B1 through F1, and it gives me the correct way of writing that expression in the function. So it's B1 colon F1, and I need to put in my right parenthesis and press enter to get 27. Oddly, there is no function for a subtraction problem. So the answer to a subtraction problem is difference, but no, there is no difference function. So you would just use regular subtraction signs when you want to subtract. Now, multiplication is very much like addition in how you can work with it. And the answer to a multiplication problem is product. So again, I already kind of know that, so I'm just going to type equals, and then I'm going to start typing product. And again, I get some other things that might be a possibility, especially down here at the bottom, but I know it's product. When I select product, it also puts in that left parenthesis. And then my task is to multiply D1 and F1. So again, I can put in separate cells and not combine them with other cells. So I can click on D1, comma, and then F1, and then finish that function with the right parenthesis and press enter. And it gives us a correct answer of 35. Or I might decide that I want to again multiply several numbers, maybe starting at B1, ending at F1, and also multiply everything in between, which is a lot of multiplication. So let's see, we can do equals product, and again, as I start typing, it's going to find the expression that I want. So product, I'll click it. Again, I get the left parenthesis, and I haven't really mentioned that in gray, usually right close to where you have selected a function, it will give you the pattern of what you need to do to complete that particular function. So here I have product, and then it's telling me that I need to put in number 1, and if there is a number 2, I could put that in, etc. So for number 1, I'm just going to simply click and drag over B1 through F1, and notice how it completes my function for me. I now have that B1 colon F1, put in my right parenthesis and press enter, and now I have that answer to that multiplication problem. Now let's look at division, which is a little quirky, and it depends on what kind of answer you want as to which function you're going to use. So first of all, let's go to D3 and just type a simple formula with no function. And what we're going to use as the basis for the functions, though, is this. We're going to start with equals, and then we'll go to B1 for 15 divided by, remember that /, and then F1, which is 7. So 15 divided by 7, press enter, and we get this number that, of course, 2 is the whole number to the left of the decimal point, and then we have quite a few digits to the right of the decimal point. So obviously the 7 doesn't go into 15 evenly. We have 2 with a remainder of some kind. If you decide that you want to have that whole number, the 2, the integer only, you will use the quotient function. So to do that, let's go up to our FX button here and kind of play with it as well. So we want to search for a function, and you know what, I'm just going to type quotient here, and I'm going to go. And again, I have a choice of some functions, but this says it returns the integer portion of a division. That's what we want. We'll click OK. And then this is sort of really interesting because when we look at quotient, it's asking for the numerator and the denominator. Well, that is what you call pieces of a fraction that you write. So the numerator is the top number, or it's the one that is divided up. So the numerator, and it really may not help to say the numerator is the dividend, but the numerator here is definitely B1. The denominator is the bottom number of the fraction, and again it tells you the denominator is the divisor. It's what you divide by. So that is F1. And then it even gives you the answer, and 15 divided by 7 would be 2, but it's 2 with a remainder. It's just that with quotient we only see, when I click OK, the 2. Pretty interesting. Now, sometimes you are actually looking for the remainder, which seems kind of odd, but with some logic, if you're looking for odd or even numbers, when you divide by 2, there isn't a remainder if it's even, but if it's odd, there is a remainder, so you're looking for mod. Well, to do that, we will again go to our insert function wizard here, our button, and I'm also going to go for mod. Or, you know, let's look and see if we can do division remainder. Let's see what happens. Click go, and it says, yes, mod. So even if I didn't know that that remainder function is mod, it will look it up for me. Now down here, it returns the remainder after a number is divided by a divisor. We'll click OK, and let's see what this term is. Well, they've changed the terminology, which is why you need to really read within this box. And it even tells me here, number is the number for which you want to find the remainder after the division is performed. Well, number is really 15. Or B1, and the divisor, when we click it, it's the number by which you want to divide the number. Well, that is definitely 7, or F1, and we again get a result, but we'll click OK. All right, so if we take 15 and divide it by 7, we definitely get 2 for the integer, but that remainder is 15 minus 14, or 1. So mod is the how we get that remainder. You may feel like you'll never need to use this information. That is pretty complex, isn't it? But it's amazing that Excel can do that, and you can find it if and when you need it. So functions are a special kind of formula. They can be included within formulas that then also do special math or even simple math, and you can combine functions together. And we're going to be looking at some of the more popular functions in our next set of videos. To learn even more, visit our mymcpl.org/online learning page, where you will find some really great online resources, which include Universal Class, LinkedIn Learning, and Learning Express Library. Tune in each week as we introduce new videos on a variety of tech topics. You can find us at 1 o'clock on Wednesday and Friday and 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Be sure to find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, or if you prefer, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at MCPLMO, where you can find our MCPL Consumer Technology Resources playlist.